welcome to the September Downtown Commission meeting. Let's do roll call. We do know we have a few known absences, Ruth Summers, Pam Winkler, and Tobias East, all absent. And now everyone else is present. Great. Has anybody had a chance to look at the minutes? Very detailed. Thank you, ladies. They look great, actually. Can I get a motion?
Second.
Discussion or changes? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. So, has everybody had a chance to look at the agenda? We have a packed agenda today. And we're gonna try and keep it moving, but, any comments, changes, updates to the agenda? Great. Okay, so first up is an update from the Asheville Police Department. If you could just introduce yourself, and thank you for being here this morning.
Captain Gary Hudak, I'm over investigation and sport operations division, the police department. Chief Bailey's engine department, that's the focus now, that staff and organizations, the risk management, just kind of about that district that we've been on a lot. We have finished the geographic location of what that district is going to look like, as it, for a couple of weeks now, and we've been meeting since then, as within the agency, pulling up and moving the bodies to get our manning aligned the way it needs to be across the city. We are probably 85% finished with that project, and over the next week we'll finalize what we're going to look like in each district, and then we'll start the process to get the officer realigned. And our goal is still to have this in project.
So that sounded like there were some changes to the district from what we previously saw.
I believe it's still the same, but I think we finalized what the geographic location would look like probably 3 or 4 weeks ago. That has not changed. It'll still encompass the downtown area with 240 being the northern Lincoln, Tunnel Road, there to Tunnel, Martin Luther King area, and go down to the middle of the district.
Last month we heard about some updates from theft in downtown. Was there anything you could update us on, part of that, like that?
Not offhand, I got a message yesterday, so I did not put any numbers. I do know this morning, somebody might need some help. We had had a couple of vehicles that were damaged last night, but we're already going to have all the details of that. That's something that did occur, so we might investigate that.
Well, it's been a busy week in your department.
Very long week. We'll continue to move on. That is one thing that staff is committed to, with Chief Bailey's departure, and Chief White, and we'll still be moving forward.
So that district is just going to roll out, there's no more public engagement or anything like that?
As far as I know about this, I'm dealing with the issues of work. We got a group of trainees that will be finishing up their field training, and they will in on their own, and call the service.
What's the plan for coverage in downtown? Is it going to?
It's going to be 24/7. The plan is that once this district comes online, it's like any one of the other districts that have 24/7 coverage, a district commander will be responsible for the operations and the supervision, 4 sergeants, just like any other district, so we can 24/7, 12-hour shifts. We would have probably working some type of power squad will be able to adjust their hours. We have some special events or
Hi, Frankie Williams. My question is, the training that they're receiving, is it also like cross-training with community groups that really have a strong emphasis downtown in homeless population or other groups so that there isn't over aggressive management of citizens?
Good question. We train all our officers on that, but then especially our officers that are currently working in the downtown area. A lot of those officers are all uprising and trained, CIT trained officers, so we will put a heavy emphasis on that. A lot of the officers that you see now that are wearing the yellow shirts on selected that we add to that downtown district just because it is a unique reason perspective of the election we have elected.
Yeah, I have to say that living downtown and dealing with a lot of your officers, I have to thank them and congratulate them for doing a great job in dealing with the multiple issues that we have downtown. So I really think you guys have done a good job of training the officers, and I mean, they have a complicated job, and I think they've done a really good job with that.
After we've had compliments along the way, so we'll take me time to get it.
That's great. Any other questions? Thank you for being here this morning. Good luck with your transition again and again and again. All right, so next up we have the Asheville Downtown Association updates, which I'll share with you. If you could take a second to just silence your cell phones, we would appreciate that. Our already challenged sound systems are helpful. All right. Or grant report. So this agenda is online on the Asheville City government page under Downtown Commission. And I would mention that because these documents are also there, which have links to the project details and links to things like this event. That's great. So the mission for the Asheville Downtown Association is to be a leader and advocate for the vitality of downtown. And I've listed the guiding principles here just because I like to continually update you on our organization. As far as updates and events, we did hold our annual meeting in August. It was August 21st, and our current membership number is 308. We do 4 speaker series in a year, and the last one of 2019 is going to be an incredible one, and it's going to be in November with Jeff Speck, author of Walkable Cities. If you haven't read that book and you're into nerdy stuff like city planning, it's an incredible one. They'll also be here visiting with local leaders and city staff to discuss relevant downtown issues and to capture his input. There are tickets available on the National Downtown Association site. Tickets is a little misleading. There's a free event, but we do ask that you register at RSVP so you can understand the crowd coming. Another big thing coming up is our biannual walkability study. We'll be doing it again this fall. We'll be utilizing the city app to help make the process smoother. And if you'd like to volunteer, that's actually pretty exciting. The email is up there. You can email Nicole at ashevilledowntown.org. Lastly, we have our last downtown after 5 of this season, which is crazy. Summer is gone. And it's going to be with the Asheville All-Stars. Thank you, Dana. There we go. So there's information about the event. September 20th. Folks like me will be out there pouring beers. And it's an all-star show of some of Asheville's best musicians. It's usually our most attended and most fun, so I highly recommend you come. All right, and that is it for the Asheville Downtown Association updates. And Stephen Lee, if you could, give us an update on design review.
There was one project that was reviewed last month, it's a conditional zoning project, and it's the one we're going to be hearing about in detail today. And Randy, you were at the meeting, I don't know if you had any additional comments on what was included in the minutes that are on the website there, but it was reviewed in detail, and I don't think there were any significant items that were brought up in regards to concern from the committee members, other than a couple of minor species issues.
Brett, anything?
We've had some discussions about just the general composition of the new facade and all this detail. But we'll see that presentation today. I just sidetracked the conversation a little bit with the program inside the building, which I think we'll probably not get into this week, but it was productive, and thanks to Jeff and the team for doing something that
It's great. Thanks for the update, guys. Sorry for the microphone passing. So we're okay. That concludes our discussion updates, and we're going to move on to new business. First up, we have the design review for the Star Building at 24 North Lexington. Jessica Bernstein will be here to present.
Thanks, Chair, members of the Commission, and public. This is a design review for the project known as There's a couple other conditions that go along with that aspect of the lodging use. Parking, as we've talked about before, when we have a project that incorporates the lodging use, parking's not required for any other uses downtown except for lodging. And so there would be a minimum of 12 parking spaces required for the project. Since it's an existing building without vehicular parking incorporated in it, this is impossible to provide it within the building. So the applicant is going to be proposing to lease parking spaces in a nearby parking lot. There's also a requirement for internal guest drop-off when you've got a lodging use, and again, the same thing when you're rehabilitating the existing building. So that would be a condition that would go along with the project as it moves forward. I summarized in the staff report a lot of the changes that are happening. So the building was built around 1915. It's a contributing resource in the National Register of Historic District, but it's not a local landmark. The Broadway facade was changed over time. Does not have its historic context any longer, but the facade on Lexington is primarily intact. The applicant will go through a lot of the changes that they're proposing. It's repointing brick, opening windows that are closed up on some of the facades. I'm sure you saw that on the plan. So a really nice way to bring the building back to life. When we're looking at the design review guidelines, the design guidelines, there's only kind of a small section towards the back that talks about rehabilitation of existing buildings. But when you look through that section and some of the other applicable guidelines, this project does comply with the design guidelines for what they're proposing for the building. We're using materials that resemble those in nearby historic buildings, especially bringing back some historical context to that facade on Broadway, using brick and authentic materials, respecting the authentic historical characteristics that are on the facade, especially the Lexington facade, keeping that intact and preserving those features. And with that, I say that rehabilitation of existing buildings is sustainable, so that's always supported. When the city adopted the historic preservation master plan, there's goals and recommendations in that historic preservation master plan to overlap review with the downtown commission whenever possible. So we have staff, Alex Cole from the HRC staff at the design review committee meeting so that she could provide that kind of overlap and that continuity of review. She looked at the proposal according to what the Secretary of the Interior standards would be. She felt that's what they were doing and noted that in the report. What the applicant is proposing does go along with the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. So that's something we're going to try to do more. It wouldn't really apply when we've got new construction, but when we do have rehabilitation of an existing building, we're going to try to do a better job of overlapping with the HRC staff. So that's included there. But the recommendation from planning staff is to approve the renovation design. It's aligned with the requirements and the guidelines for development in this area. And restore the heavily altered facade, plastic details, and materials reflective of the area. So that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jessica. Because of this microphone, I guess maybe if y'all could just flag me with your hand if you want to speak, we'll pass it. A little process information for the room. So we just heard from staff, now we'll hear from the developer, and then the commission will discuss the design. This portion of the conversation is literally just about design. So if we want to talk about it being STRs or any kind of other use, that's going to come in the following agenda item. And then we'll have public comment at that time as well. So we're just speaking to the design, to the design guidelines.
That's a plan, there's a surface lot that is just the one that's on College Street, that's where they're looking to lease the spaces right now.
I'm channeling Ruth at the moment, since she can't be here today, and it's interesting to see that a project requires that it has parking, that we would take it from the public amenity parking, pull it from leased parking, when we know we already have a challenging parking problem. I think that's slightly different than building into your project. Did you have, Sally?
And just to note that for the, your own interpretation of the impact discussion, but from the UDO, that is allowed when a project, it has a lot with renovations, when parking is required now, and it wouldn't have been required in 1915, or whenever a building is constructed, we have a provision in the UDO that allows for you to satisfy your parking requirement by providing it within a certain proximity. So that's something that is afforded to property owners and developers. Because this project is following the conditional zoning path, that's something that would be noted as a special requested condition, just to solidify it.
This is a, this is a process question, I guess. Is parking part of our design review? Is this informational, or is parking actually a component that we can consider voting on or not? Is parking design?
You have standards there's standards in the UDO, and there's standards in your guidelines that relate to parking. So since parking is generally not required in the CBD, we often don't see it, but there are standards that say when parking is provided, such as if it's in a parking structure on a pedestrian street, you're required to mask the building, or other parking structures, you have requirements to use penetration, or if you do provide a surface parking lot, we don't prohibit that. There's requirements for how you mask or soften that surface parking lot from the street. So there's design standards that relate to parking. And I'm gonna defer to you, but it seems like that's a little more impact.
I agree, I think it's gonna be in the second agenda item, simply because the structure is existing, it is what it is, we can't change that. And the change of use is what is requiring parking, so I think we should kind of default it to the second agenda item, if that's all right, see you in here? Okay, great. I was curious about the side of the building, and this may be better for the architect, but, there you go. Is there an alleyway along that? If the building comes in and builds in that vacant parking lot, what is the lot line there? I was just wondering about the daylighting, the windows, and alley activation, you want, okay, we're gonna switch to the architectural team. Yeah, that's a major improvement to windows. Yeah, how many new windows is that?
I'm not sure. It's a bunch though. All the ones closer to the street, the two closest to the street are all new, so that's 6 windows there. And then there's some on the front side, the front maybe 3. So, and then we're filling in some that are missing.
And opening up some of the porta out there. Do you know the answer to my question about the alleyway? Is there an alley that runs along that wall or anything that,
There's a 10-foot, see the site plan. Sorry. You can see that little strip there, it's 10 feet wide, and then it goes through to the street.
Relating to the alley, is that a privately owned alley or a public alley?
It looks like it's public alley.
It's private, it's private.
It's privately owned.
Yeah, just one point, and this is kind of regarding parking. Is there any thought process about trying to introduce a living zone after this many residences? No living zone?
No.
Just in terms of parking and just my personal experience of, I live in a diagonal across from this. There's 19 units in my building, there's no parking. I know 4 units in my building, where people don't actually have cars downtown. So it's very cool.
Thank you.
Speaking to the loading, where will the unloading and loading occur?
There's a loading zone
questions on design? Anyone? Are we all waiting for the second agenda item? Okay. I'll be today. All right, so how about motion? So we're gonna have some public comment as well, but we need motion.
I had one other item I was going to clarify when I got, that Dane went to the loading aspect. So right now, anticipation, we are leasing spaces just adjacent to the building, in the private alley at 10 foot. And the parking spaces in there will basically act as our staging slash loading area. So that alley does not get blocked. It's not the primary access into that parking area. It will serve as well, be able to pull into there, use it as loading if necessary, pull into those spaces. So, while we recognize there are existing loading from the park, we recognize that they all there.
Are you also aware that there's some activity around planning an alleyway from an alley, kind of an alley tour? And this is a private alley, so it's a little different. I'm not sure what the rest are, and maybe you might be able to speak to that more, but I would encourage you all to talk to those folks. I think it's the Broadway corridor group that's working on it. And they're planning some kind of, neat activation of alleyways in general, at least in the long run right now, so I would encourage you to talk with them.
Yeah, that's some great information. The Tingo Alley specifically, has a, I can see that a lot. This little private alley is really just going to cut that service.
Yeah, as far as I know, there's no plans for including the private alleys, which we have a number of. I don't know if Tingle is a private alley or a public alley, is that a private alley?
I'm not sure. I know that, I understood it was public. I know that the actual, there's a lot of, individual parking spaces off of Tingle. The lot lines come up and Tingle on the backs of the building, so there's room for parking behind some of those, some of the other businesses that activate Tingle, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter as long as we would have access. And I think that's a good place for your waste removal. I mean, really not any other good place for it.
If anybody in the commission has looked at this really recently, this is like one of the most dilapidated buildings in town. I think it's a great adaptive reuse, it's not like we're in an approval of the design and renovation plans for, historic building becoming more worthless.
I'd like to suggest that you add some control measures around the ecosystem.
With control measures around needs.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, so we're gonna actually ask if there's any public comment on this, and this is just to the design of the building. Would anyone in the public like to speak to this? Commissioners, any further discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Design only. Andrew is opposed? That's it? Okay. Great, thank you. So, to the development team, we're gonna hear another project next, and then we're gonna circle back with the second agenda item that discusses more about the impacts and implications of this project and the use. So you have made it through design review very easily, that's great. But if you'd like to stick around, be here for questions during that time, we would appreciate it. Okay, we are moving on. Up next, we have the Cox and Asheville mixed-use development. We'll be hearing from staff again. Wow, it's a big one.
It's a big one.
Let's talk about it.
Right. So,
It's like, because then we're gonna join the two together afterwards, and have one discussion about both. I know that's why I asked about the agenda. Is that a concern?
It is a concern because I feel like the concerns for this first property, the Star Building, that aren't design related will get washed away with the overall discussion. When we said we would go by design only, and that's the only reason why I voted in affirmative, yes, I can change my vote.
So, would you rather us have a second agenda item for that particular project now, and then move back to this other project, and then have a second agenda item for that project? Is that what you discuss there?
I feel like
Back separately?
yeah.
Is everybody
Yeah, I thought this was a great project when I first saw it, and then I saw the short-term rental, and I really can't support short-term rental for this building for a variety of reasons. The other issue is the loading and unloading. I don't think that's practical on Broadway. I think you need to come up with a different solution for the loading and unloading. But the short-term rental, I think, would be not acceptable to council.
I'd also like to hear the plans for the existing businesses and future business retail on the ground floor, how that's going to be activated, and the details that we can get on that.
I think that the current zoning for the building is correct. The rezoning to a conditional use for hotel is not correct. So I'm happy to let the, I think the zoning should stay where it stays as is, and council has the zoning correct for this area, and I'm going to advocate for leaving it as it is. The potential for this building will still remain for something else. It's not the building is going to go away. It will remain that time. And until we start saying what else can we build here, we will not be getting anything else built here. So, with this, a lot of talk about the saturation point of hotels, but what that's really talking about is the conversation about the saturation point of visitors versus residents. And hospitality is finite, infrastructure is finite, resources are finite, and as we get closer and closer to the breaking point, we must take a closer and closer look at every additional step toward that breaking point. And I am very comfortable not approving any change, not advocating for any change to any conditional use zone for a hotel, like any semantic ownership structure that you might conjure up. I am not, I think even the applicant said hotel component at one point, because it's the easiest way to refer to a short-term vacation time or rental or maybe. It's the shortest word you can use to describe that kind of situation. So I am, I'm very comfortable waiting to see the potential of this building with another one.
I very much appreciate renovating an important building, even though it's not historic. For me, hospitality represents people in a place who make room for their neighbors and also visitors. When parking and like certain infrastructure to allow employees and visitors and locals to feel comfortable that they can remain is left out, I wonder how much of the renovation is based on the needs of the whole and not just the needs of the project. And so specifically leaving out where people will actually leave their vehicle if they have a job there or if they're visiting or what have you, or they're in adjacent to their neighbors and how much space they're going to consume is a concern for me. It's always going to be a concern because it represents moving people out so I can make more space for myself. And as a cooperative developer, that is not in cooperation with how we actually advance together.
As we all talk, we're going to be compiling what could become a recommendation to council. So I know there's a lot of ongoing conversation around hotel moratorium, but let's try to be really clear in what we are recommending, not just throwing on the hotel bandwagon. So far, I've gathered that we are appreciative of the adaptive reuse of the structure and improving the structure and facilitating what is, like Stephen said, one of our most dilapidated structures. But there's also growing concern about the saturation of lodging use, I'll call it, not just hotel, short-term rental, but lodging use, short stays in downtown, and that's something we know council's already working on. What are the other impacts? So, Franz, you mentioned the businesses. So we know this level of renovation, everybody who's currently in the building would be removed for reconstruction, I believe. I'm not sure if anybody can speak to that. It's like a pulling up an image. The tenant right now is April Cornell. CNC, but they've already removed So the displacement is minimal compared to the last meter was on the south. But nonetheless, still some displacement. Okay, here's an aerial. It really is a wonky building.
So this shows the, Broadway side, and they, you know, pieces there, but they're renovating the ground level spaces on both sides. So there'll be the restaurant on the April Cornell side, on the other side, the CSC side, with the recess that's existing. And then the other side is retail spaces. So it's, the ground level spaces would be preserved for restaurant, retail, the typical uses, and you see there's those are Broadway. So it's large retail space, or could be broken into smaller spaces. And there are two front doors, so it could be either one large space or four smaller spaces on Broadway. And then the plans would be the restaurant space and retail along that side.
My question to the commission is, if the developer asked us what would be a more appropriate use of this building? You know, we're looking at some of the most expensive real estate in the city of Asheville for land costs. And given the size of this building, it's a big building. The first thing I think of is office space. I know, obviously, there's an affordable housing crisis. Affordable housing is not going to happen in this location. I would, for those of you who have been to and or studied cities like Boulder, where high tech has moved in, and I know that's something we would all love to see, but, you know, office use, parking requirements, the lack of activity in the evenings, those bring out their own challenges. And the fact is, this is an incredibly expensive restoration. This is why it hasn't happened yet. And I'd like to ask y'all, I think we should try to help brainstorm on what are some possible other uses for this today. And financially, what would make sense?
Any response to that?
Yeah, I was really hoping to see condos in this building. I think that would be, I manage 3 condo buildings downtown. They don't have parking. The owners manage to, you know, find parking where they don't have cars. And I think condos would be much more acceptable to the community in general.
I would think they are condos, just for short term.
Well, that's not condos, not-
We need long term, actual residents living in downtown. I think, you know, that's a common sentiment these days. I think one of the things, if we're gonna recommend anything about this project for council, that we need to echo the recommendation we've been saying for a long time, which is that some kind of assessment or study information is somehow procured about what's too much. Is there a balance point? When we talk about the next agenda item, I'll have some figures for you on the numbers of hotel rooms versus lodging or versus residential units downtown. You know, I've heard about it, like, anecdotally, because we don't really know what's best, but I think if we're gonna make any recommendations to council today, that should include a request for more information. I'm not sure if that's something that's gonna come about as part of the moratorium process. We do have an agenda item for the moratorium later, and City Attorney Brad Hammond will be here to discuss that. Discuss that, just coming up.
So I would recommend, and I'm gonna use this as an example, it's not the only thing that fits this bill, is something that also activates local businesses and other people actually becoming vendors of the actual use. So for example, an event venue. What happens with downtown event venues that aren't run by hotels is a lot of times it is local vendors, whether it's the caterer, the event planner, the rental community, what have you, small corporations, larger corporations that are based here locally and regionally, there's an activation of other businesses around that. So that's not the only option, but that's kind of where my mind goes, is how do you then include more local businesses?
Yeah, that is something we keep seeing by the time these projects, these conditions and projects get to council, there are often pledges around paying the wages, trying to secure local tenants. I'm not sure if this applicant is going to be doing any of that, but the opportunity is certainly there. Sometimes when we look at these projects, I wish that we talked about the financial impact to the city's budget. I don't know what that is for this particular project, that I would like for us to be including this information as we move through these reviews, so that we know what this current, I guess we go with property tax, the city's portion, 48 cents or something, I believe it is, and what is contributing to the annual budget, because if you're engaged in the city and you're listening to the annual budget process, then you know that there's never enough money and there's an endless long list of needed projects. So when we start to kind of choke down growth, what we often do is also choke down income growth, and I think that's part of the conversation. So I would encourage the applicant to share that with the public and council going forward, what the financial impact is. You know, we saw with the Flatiron that it was improved use of the value of the property went up, and then it was a historic tax credit project, so then it was 50% abated immediately, so we don't actually know what the impact was. And we won't know this one today, but you know, we short funded our transit master plan. I mean, when we talk about where the new money is coming from, often these projects are our best hope. So I think that's something we should be recommending council with that as well, going forward in all projects. Any further discussion about this particular one and its use and impacts to downtown, or components of the recommendation we might make to council? I'm particularly concerned about the impact of the sidewalk closure, and not really having information about that, so I would encourage TRC and staff to flush that out, so we know, because it's a really busy intersection on the Broadway side. If that entire sidewalk is closed, it seems like it could be a mess there. I'm just curious how that was rolled over, but not really much we can do about it. Any other comments, discussions, questions, concerns?
I don't have any solutions here, but I'll echo the concern. We just created this situation where it's a really attractive place to make a lot of money towards it. If we keep giving up these landmark buildings to transient tourism, it will slowly pull us all out. So, there's got to be a solution where we incentivize local people and local businesses to do the best in downtown, make it a little more achievable. But right now, that's not the situation we have. It's
It's such a great point, Brent, thank you. Every time we convert one of these historic buildings, we say, well, it's beautiful, historic, and it should be upkept and restored to its beauty, but then we fill it with other people. I'm curious what we're restoring it for. It's like makes a postcard or something, you know, get rid of it. Side comment. So I have, Andrew?
I have a motion.
Okay.
Are we ready for that?
Yeah, did you capture some of the recommendations I was saying?
I'll let you make your friend on that.
I move that the downtown commission and our advisory board of the Asheville City Council make a recommendation to council to retain current zoning designation without conditional use.
Yes.
I move that the downtown commission and our advisory role to the Asheville City Council make a recommendation to council to retain the current zoning designation without conditional use.
Will there be public comment?
So process-wise, once we get a second, we're gonna move to public comment. So, any amendments to that? I mean, it's a very simple way to put it, instead of recommending they do not approve the project, it's really just recommending we don't change zoning. So we have a first, and we have an amendment, we have a second to the amendment. Mr. Rhythm?
Yeah.
Kimberly seconded, okay. So now we're gonna hold up, and we're gonna hear from y'all. So if you have something to say around the design, just the impacts to this particular project in downtown, if you come up to the mic, you'll have 3 minutes, if you could state your name, and public comment starts at 9:26.
My name is David Feather, a planner and a preservationist, and someone interested very much in successful economic development for Asheville. I believe it is very, very vital and urgent to also consider the economic impact on the economy of our community in evaluating alternatives, and I urge you to add that feature to your thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nutter. Anyone else, please come up, state your name.
Lincoln Angus, a resident of downtown, a member of several civic organizations that focus on downtown. Balancing point, we're past it. We are past that point. We cannot absorb any more vacation, rental, hotel, fly-by-night incomers. Both roads, Lexington and Broadway, are choked to the point of immobility. Both intersections are frequently blocked. If anyone stops to unload, it shuts off the second lane. And it's completely unrealistic to say we're going to drop in 23 short-term rentals and have 12 parking spaces. We cannot currently navigate downtown as it stands. And I want people to remember what is kitty corner for this site, the Harris Project. That might bring in a lot of traffic. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else like to speak? State your name, please. That's all right.
I'm representing Camille Cameron, worker resident there. My concern comes with the line timeline.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I have 6-year lease with the building owners to lease bill, and I do have these living concerns with short-term rentals too, considering, some areas there's about to be completed, we have AC right across the street. And then I do agree with the buildings and concern because I park in there trying to go to the store all the time, and there's like 4 cars in line and they're walking up the street. So I just wanted to raise those concerns and concern myself as the manager of the store, who was, I think we were one of the last retailers there to see it.
Thank you, Ms. Peace. I appreciate that. Anyone else like to speak? You can just introduce yourself.
Good morning, Commissioner, Chief Officer. I definitely echo, a lot of the concerns and some of the potential solutions that have been mentioned here, particularly Brent's idea of, how can we figure a way that the community can take ownership, of these spaces. And really would love to see city council, have much more active conversation, to that note. And also parking, it's amazing that we haven't done a better job at figuring out parking downtown. As long as we've been talking about it, but that all aside, one kind of creative solution, I kind of was thinking of this, what if the developer could create affordable housing in all 23 of those units, because service workers need affordable housing in downtown. That has to be at the top of the list of needs, for the city, people that work downtown need affordable places to work. And so just one thought would be if all 23 of those could be essentially managed units by service workers, and then maybe a little carve out for someone
to do a moratorium, which is fine, if that's what you want to do. But how do we compare to other cities in terms of hotel rooms and tourists, things like that? And I understand that when you live locally, I mean, are we saying we don't want tourists here anymore, that we don't accept people from Charlotte or Atlanta? Do we want to build a wall around the city? I'm just a little bit confused about what we're trying to do. Like, we don't go to other places as tourists as well. Do we like it if those people hate us? I mean, we're talking about people who come here because they enjoy the city. We want to, I don't really have an opinion about this building. I'm not in favor necessarily of change, bending over backwards to change zoning to accommodate, you know, things like that. So I'm not going to make an opinion about that, but I'm just a little concerned more generally. It sounds like we're also making a false choice that we can't have apartments if we have hotels. Because I also see when apartment developers come, that might be the next project to show up. We also give apartment developers a hard time, yet we're saying we need more apartments. So, you know, what is it, what is really the vision for the city? I'm more trying to understand that, because it seems like we go back and forth. And, you know, maybe we have too many hotels or short-term apartments downtown. Obviously, I think it'd be great if there were more residents downtown. It doesn't seem like we have enough apartments to begin with. I think that's something we should be building more downtown in any event. But I also feel like there was a hotel project the other day that went to city council. It seems like we blow out a proportion of 100 rooms, which is like 200 additional visitors, and the impact they may have. We really don't like the tourists. You know, the best thing we probably could do would be to shut down and build more estate, and people would stop coming. I mean, is that the solution? I mean, we just don't want tourists here? Is that what it is? Or we want more apartments? Like, I want to know what people are for, not just what people are against. It's easy to be against stuff. You know, I'm against a lot of stuff, right? But I think it's more interesting to know what we're for. I'm for more apartments, definitely more affordable apartments, that'd be great. But how do we achieve that without necessarily saying, well, we don't like this? You know, how can we progress the city, you know, to understand what we want it to be, and how do we achieve that? That to me is more interesting than the intense things, which is really just very easy to do. So that's my general comment that I think we should put on. So I don't really have any specific thought on that project, except that it's a nice building and it'd be nice if it was renovated one day. I don't know what the best use is. I know we do have a property where we renovated the top floor to be office space. And we had a tenant, but it's been sitting for, you know, vacant for 6 months. So, you know, we need office space, yeah, but at the same time, it's not that easy because we might not have the business depth in the city that we do. Well, that's the other question. I'm wondering, does anybody ever talk to the businesses that are here, like the restaurants? Are they also against tourism? I'm curious, and I don't usually hear them speak, so it would seem to be very quiet. The restaurants and the shops and the artists that we want to protect do seem to thrive on more tourism. So I'm wondering what that, you know, when we get to listen to those people as well, if they're also against, you know, tourists, I'd be curious. It'd be great to get someone to participate in this dialogue about a moratorium on tourism.
Thank you, sir. Lots of good comments there. Anyone else who wishes to speak?
David, I think you asked some really good questions about, tourism and numbers and things like that. It's trying to remove the anecdotal and emotional from the decision-making process. All about that. In line with that, I have been working on some original research, which is incomplete. I'll share for the first time a little bit of what I found. This number is, I saw in a news article a while ago. It's a 42-to-1 ratio, which is 42-to-1 overnight visitors per resident. So I said, that's interesting. How does that compare to other cities? Well, here is a couple other cities judging on publicly available information from tourism bureaus across the country. New Orleans, which we know has serious problems with Airbnb and displacement of locals and our ratio of culture due to tourism, they are at 36-to-1. They have a lower ratio of tourists to residents. If you look at and then if you want to look at somebody that's past us, Charleston is at 56-to-1. So we see right in the middle, two cities that are undergoing major problems with displacement and negative, the accumulated negative side effects of tourism. It does seem that tourism has a tipping point where all of a sudden the negative begins to outweigh the positives. The research I'm attempting to do with these ratios is trying to find exactly where that is and build an argument for a sustainable management of that economy that works as a utility to the people who live here. So thank you for asking those questions, and I look forward to sharing more on the research that's completed.
15 more today, guys. Thanks, thank you for that, Andrew. We chatted a little bit about that. I'm looking forward to additional research. I will remind everyone too, we often say we have 11 million tourists per year. The number might have gone up recently, but so I think the last public comment touched on this as well, that so 3.9 million of those 11 million stayed overnight. So, excuse me? Yeah, so the other 7 million are coming to Asheville from a nearby location, visiting our wonderful city and returning home. And I just like to make that point because I don't want us to get in the habit of thinking that 11 million people come and stay overnight every year. It is a widely different number. And the conversation around this number should be different, because I personally don't want to say, hey, Waynesville, don't come to see us. Hey, Charlotte, don't come to see us. You're our neighbors. And I appreciate that level of tourism. All right, any other comments, questions, concerns before we take action?
David, thanks for coming up and giving that viewpoint. I think it's helpful for everyone to hear that. So I think we can all clarify that numbers impact tourism. We're all profit from it. It's not easy to address this issue because I design these rooms. Like we have a real conflict here. There needs to be a balance. So it's easy to say no to stuff. It's not easy to give this a check. It's a really complicated issue that's going to affect all of us personally and financially.
Just one quick thing too, I think that what city staff has outlined is the moratorium process, public input processes. I wish it could have happened years ago, but there's a very clear outlined public input process that would occur, and I think obviously we're at a point where this all needs to get fleshed out, but if you haven't read it, the staff's proposed agendas on that, so I think it's important to see that.
Thank you. One little last share of data just to complete the conversation. So in March of this year, we were having this discussion around another project, and I did a little presentation and coordinated all the data we have for downtown. And this is 6 months ago. And at that point in time, we had 1,272 residential units in downtown and 1,728 hotel units. And that's a 58-42 split, 58% hotels. Since then, we have had 2 more projects come online. Flatiron actually did 72 Degrees, not moved forward, so we won't include it. But the Flatiron puts the hotel count at 1,799 and bumps it up another percent to 43%. Then the next agenda item, should it go through, is a massive residential project. And I'm happy to say that should it go through, it would add 541 residential units to downtown. And guess what that does? It magically creates a 50-50 split. 50 hotel, 50 residential. And again, we don't have a goal anywhere in our purview of what should be need the big residential, we all know that, but where is the uncomfortable number of hotels, we don't know. And I think it's crucial that we figure that out, we're just gonna be politicizing and having this, reaction to hotels until it's figured out, personally. Okay, we have a motion, we have an amended motion, we have a second, we have a complete discussion. All right, all in favor of Andrew's, let me actually have you repeat the motion, let me staff them. Okay.
We have that, it's this, so, here. Oh my goodness. Oh, sorry, Stephen.
Draft motion, that the downtown commission and our advisory role of city council make a recommendation to retain the current zoning designation without conditional use. The commission also recommends to add that there is growing concern about growth in lodging uses downtown and recommends a study to better understand what is too much. So there's like a way to finish that sentence that we didn't quite catch.
Something about the growing concern of saturation of lodging uses without real information to use to evaluate the impacts.
Yeah, quantifiable data.
Quantifiable data.
Okay, okay. I'm not so good about that.
Our quantifiable data to evaluate the impacts.
Okay. The motion is that the downtown commission and our advisory role of city council make a recommendation to retain the current zoning designation without conditional use. Also recommends, also notes that there's a growing concern about the growth and saturation of lodging uses downtown without quantifiable data to evaluate the impacts.
That includes growth changes, not just quantifiable data related to buildings, but quantifiable data related to changes in use of roads.
To evaluate the impacts, including changes to roads.
Yeah, but at this point, we're amending an amendment, so we need to, clear this process up. How do I?
Well, I'm not so fast, sometimes I'm slow.
Oh, no, it's fine, I just need to clean up the process.
Okay, we're just getting a little hairy with our rules here, but, so we had a motion, we had an amendment, we had a second and a discussion, but now what we're trying to do is actually amend the entire first motion. So what I think we need to do actually, Spice is here to school us, I think we actually have to restate the entire motion as a new motion, and then we won't need another public discussion, we'll just speak to that change. Does that make sense? Yeah, sorry, this process. I'm gonna pass you the mic, you can make it. No?
I just want to add a word, or a small word too, so then, how does it read, Dina? Sprinkle.
Can you pass her that one? Jessica, maybe you can pass her that microphone. That might be easier. Thank you. No? Just have to, yeah. Sorry about the sound system issues, guys.
The downtown commission and the advisory role of city council make a recommendation to retain the current zoning designation without conditional use and states the growing concern about the growth and saturation of lodging uses downtown without quantifiable data to evaluate the impacts, including but not limited to changes to roads. Roads? Roads? Roads?
What's the use of roads?
Use.
Existing roads. Use of existing roads. Specifically, Broadway, Lexington in this case. And
That's fine, but that can be in with the words roads in it and things like that. Which means that we would now need a second on that particular motion. Anyone, you can raise your hand and help us.
Well, we've announced any motion on the table.
But we just now and then, I know, and then on, and then it has something, that's why it's not a motion.
You're saying this is
Right. It doesn't change significantly. No, it's been, we're amending it first. Right, but you can't amend it twice. I know, it's rules, what were you trying to call that? It's okay, we've got a newly stated motion, let's just keep moving. Does anybody have a second for that newly stated motion that Dan just read to us? Right, Romsey is seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please show hands because the microphone issue, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. All right, sorry for that annual process. Now, we are going to go back to the design review for the Toxic National Mixed Use Development. Thank you for the team that stuck through that with us. This is a big one. Does anybody need a break? Bathroom break?